The next day, I usually wake up in some strange place with a kid with an accent playing with my feet.
For more than 3 decades, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson wasn't just a talk show, it was the ultimate comedy stage. A single appearance on Carson's couch could make a career, but only a rare few could truly keep up with the man behind the desk. While hundreds of celebrities passed through Studio 6B, only a handful had the kind of timing, wit, and fearlessness needed to genuinely crack Johnny up. And when Carson laughed, television history was made. What made these guests unforgettable wasn't rehearsed jokes or polished routines. It was spontaneity, moments when the script fell apart and pure comedy took over. Carson valued quick thinking above all else. And the guests who dared to challenge him, surprise him, or completely derail the conversation became legends. Some made him laugh so hard he couldn't continue. Others turned simple interviews into iconic moments, still replayed decades later. These weren't just funny people. They were masters of live television. One wrong beat could fall flat, but when it worked, the result was magic. Carson knew it, the audience felt it, and the guests who delivered became permanent fixtures in late-night history. Tonight, we're revisiting the guests who didn't just entertain, they owned the stage, made Johnny lose control, and proved why live television will never be matched again. Johnny. Carson had a rare ability to recognize comedy talent within seconds. And the guests who truly stood out were those who understood that The Tonight Show was not about delivering prepared material, it was about timing, instinct, and trust. Carson rewarded comedians who could think on their feet and weren't afraid to abandon their routines if the moment demanded it. The funniest guests weren't always the loudest or most outrageous. They were the ones who could play off Johnny's subtle cues and turn a simple question into an unforgettable moment. One of the defining traits of Carson's funniest guest was fearlessness. Sitting across from the king of late-night comedy was intimidating, and many guests froze or defaulted to safe answers. The ones who succeeded did the opposite. They challenged Johnny, teased him, or deliberately steered conversations into unpredictable territory. Carson respected that courage, often leaning back and letting the moment breathe when he sensed something special was happening. These exchanges weren't planned, they were discovered live. And that spontaneity became their strength. Another key factor was chemistry. The guests who made Johnny laugh the hardest understood his rhythm. They listened carefully, responded quickly, and never overplayed a joke. Carson valued restraint as much as boldness. A perfectly timed pause or a raised eyebrow could earn a bigger laugh than a long setup. Guests who mastered this balance turned interviews into performances that felt effortless, even though they required incredible skill. What truly elevated these moments was Carson's willingness to share the spotlight. Unlike many hosts, Johnny didn't need to dominate the conversation. When a guest found their groove, he stepped back, allowing them to shine. His laughter, genuine, sometimes uncontrollable, became the audience's signal that something extraordinary was happening. These moments created legends, turning appearances into career-defining milestones. The funniest guests also understood that failure was part of the risk. Live television offered no safety net, and not every joke landed. But Carson admired guests who recovered gracefully. A missed punchline followed by quick self-awareness often became funnier than the original attempt. This ability to adapt in real time separated the great from the forgettable. Ultimately, the guests who made Johnny Carson laugh weren't just funny, they were smart, intuitive performers who respected the art of live comedy. Their appearances remind us why The Tonight Show remains a benchmark for entertainment and why those moments still feel fresh decades later. These guests didn't just visit the show, they became part of its legacy. What truly separated Johnny Carson's funniest guests from the rest was their ability to turn ordinary conversation into comedy without forcing it. These guests understood that the magic of The Tonight Show didn't come from punchlines alone, but from how moments unfolded naturally. A casual remark, a misunderstood question, or an unexpected reaction could instantly become comedy gold. The guests who excelled were those who recognized these openings and leaned into them with confidence and precision. Many of these legendary appearances were fueled by improvisation. Carson himself was a master of quick wit, and he respected guests who could match his pace. When an interview drifted off script, the funniest guests didn't panic. They thrived. They redirected the conversation, exaggerated a harmless mistake, or used Johnny's response as a setup for something even funnier. This back and forth created an energy that felt electric, and audiences could sense that they were witnessing something that would never happen the same way again. Another reason these guests stood out was their willingness to laugh at themselves. Self-awareness played a major role in why their humor landed so effectively. When a joke fell flat, they didn't try to push through it, they acknowledged it. Carson loved this approach because it kept the moment honest. Instead of awkward silence, failure became part of the performance. That humility made the humor feel relatable, and it often turned small missteps into the biggest laughs of the night. Physical comedy also played a role, but only when used with restraint. Some guests relied on facial expressions, exaggerated gestures, or playful movement to complement their words. Carson appreciated physical humor when it enhanced the conversation rather than overpowering it. A simple look toward the audience or an unexpected pause could send Johnny into laughter. These subtle choices demonstrated a deep understanding of live performance and audience psychology. What made these appearances even more memorable was how relaxed they felt. The funniest guests gave the impression that they weren't trying to impress anyone. They treated the couch like a comfortable space rather than a spotlight. This ease allowed their personalities to shine through naturally. Carson responded to that authenticity, often dropping his own guard and becoming a participant rather than a moderator. When that happened, the show transformed from an interview into a shared comedic experience. Over time, viewers began to recognize these guests as safe bets for laughter. Their names alone generated anticipation because audiences knew something unpredictable was coming. Carson, too, seemed genuinely excited when they appeared. His body language changed, his timing sharpened, and his laughter became more frequent. These subtle cues reinforced the sense that something special was unfolding. In the end, these guests didn't just make Johnny Carson laugh, they elevated the entire format of late-night television. Their appearances demonstrated that true comedy isn't scripted or controlled. It's discovered in the moment. That's why these performances remain timeless, and why they continue to define what great late-night comedy looks like. A defining trait of the funniest guests on Johnny Carson's show was their sense of timing. Timing is everything in comedy, and the guests who could instinctively know when to pause, when to push, and when to react instantly were the ones who left the biggest mark. They understood Carson's rhythm, his subtle cues, and the way he delivered his own jokes. By aligning with his timing rather than working against it, these performers created seamless comedy that appeared effortless. For the audience, it looked natural. For Carson, it was pure genius in action. Some of the most memorable moments came from guests who dared to be bold. Whether it was a completely offbeat remark or a playful challenge to Carson himself, these individuals weren't afraid to take risks. This willingness to push boundaries made the humor unpredictable and kept both Johnny and the audience on their toes. Those who hesitated often delivered safe, polite lines that earned polite chuckles. But the bold guests who embraced spontaneity could elicit uncontrollable laughter, turning a simple talk show segment into an unforgettable moment of television history. Many of these guests also had a deep understanding of the live format. They knew that every reaction, glance, and gesture could become part of the comedic tapestry. Some would play off Carson's facial expressions or interrupt with a perfectly timed line, while others incorporated physical comedy in subtle ways that heightened the humor without overshadowing the conversation. This mastery of both verbal and nonverbal cues created moments that were rich, layered, and endlessly replayable. What made these appearances legendary was not just the skill of the guests, but the genuine connection they formed with Johnny Carson. Laughter, after all, is contagious, and when Carson was fully engaged, it elevated the entire room. The funniest guests seemed to understand this intuitively, creating a dialogue that felt as much like a performance as it did a conversation. Their wit, charm, and ability to improvise allowed Johnny to let loose, creating some of the most iconic television moments in history. It's also important to note that these guests didn't rely solely on clever lines. Personality played a crucial role. Guests who brought authenticity, warmth, or a mischievous edge often outshone those who were only technically skilled. Carson responded to genuine energy, and the funniest moments often arose from the natural chemistry between host and guest rather than rehearsed material. This is why many of these segments still resonate today. They capture human connection as much as comedic brilliance. Ultimately, the funniest guests on Johnny Carson's couch were a perfect blend of skill, timing, courage, and authenticity. They didn't just make the host laugh. They transformed the show into a playground of creativity and spontaneity. These appearances remain celebrated because they showcase what happens when preparation meets instinct, talent meets opportunity, and a legendary host meets extraordinary performers. In the final look at Johnny Carson's funniest guests, it becomes clear that their impact went far beyond a single appearance. These performers didn't just deliver laughs. They created moments that shaped the legacy of The Tonight Show. By combining quick thinking, boldness, and authentic personality, they set a standard for what it meant to excel in live television. Their presence transformed the show into an unpredictable stage where spontaneity reigned supreme, and every episode had the potential to become legendary. One of the most remarkable aspects of these appearances was how the guests handled unpredictability. Live television is inherently uncertain. Lines could be forgotten, technical issues could arise, and reactions could defy expectation. The funniest guests embraced this uncertainty, turning potential mistakes into comedic opportunities. They didn't fear improvisation. They thrived on it. This adaptability made each appearance feel unique and alive, and it highlighted their professionalism and comedic intelligence. It also reminded viewers why live television had an excitement that pre-recorded programs could rarely match. Another reason these guests became unforgettable was their ability to connect with the audience through Carson. Comedy is relational, and the most effective humor on the show came from a genuine dialogue between host, guest, and viewers. Whether teasing Johnny, sharing personal anecdotes, or engaging in playful banter, the funniest guests created a sense of intimacy that made the audience feel included in the joke. This connection amplified laughter and left lasting impressions that still resonate decades later. Physical humor, quick wit, and playful banter all played a role, but the underlying factor was authenticity. Guests who relied solely on rehearsed lines often fell flat, while those who brought their true selves to the stage, quirks, vulnerabilities, and all, captivated both Carson and the audience. Their humor felt effortless because it stemmed from a genuine understanding of the moment and the people in it. In many cases, this authenticity allowed them to push boundaries safely, producing comedy that was bold without being forced. Finally, the legacy of these guests demonstrates the enduring power of great live performance. Johnny Carson's laughter, often uncontrollable and genuine, was both the reward and the signal of comedic success. The moments when he was caught off guard, doubled over, or struggling to speak were immortalized because they showcased an extraordinary synergy between host and guest. These were more than television appearances. They were collaborations in real time, demonstrations of timing, intelligence, and the joy of shared creativity. In conclusion, the funniest guests Johnny Carson ever had weren't simply entertainers. They were masters of timing, improvisation, and authenticity. They transformed ordinary interviews into legendary television, creating moments of comedy that remain unmatched. Through their talent, courage, and connection with Carson, they helped define the golden era of late-night television, leaving a legacy of laughter that continues to influence performers and audiences alike. These appearances remind us that comedy is not just about jokes, it's about timing, chemistry, and the ability to create magic in the moment. Something Johnny Carson and his funniest guests accomplish night after night.